Hi, everybody. Let's get the TikTok people situated. Hi, I'm Dr. Tochi. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm on the men's and the women's. And do excuse me, I don't know why my sinuses are stuffed. And I've been doing like everything I'm supposed to do, the lemon, the ginger, the hot water, the whatnot. So I let me just take it that my body is detoxing. Because I have been going through a fast, which I announced, was it 2 days ago, when we had our group invitations and also during our touching base on Sunday. So be sure to get your drink, your snack, your notebook, and your pen. We're going to have some exciting forbidden fruit in today's class. Let's see what's going on over here. Yeah. Just trying to make sure the Facebook, the TikTok people are set up. Let me wipe the screen. It's kind of looking foggy. I do have a light source here. I don't know if it's because of the light source, but we'll do what we need to do. Okay. We will do what we need to do. Let me get that situated. Maybe bring them a little bit closer. Alrighty. Hello, Ms. Rupenda. Hope you're doing well. Please remember to give the class a thumbs up. That lets the algorithm know that we are in session and it will notify other people. If you are on YouTube, remember that after the live stream ends, you can go ahead and hype the video. Apparently, there's this new feature put out by YouTube where viewers can hype a video. So please take a moment to give the class a thumbs up. That encourages the algorithm to notify more people that class is in session and also to trigger the notifications of fellow classmates who are subscribers. If you need to get a hold of me, remember my website is at drtochi.com, tochi.us, where you can get your dream interpretations, spiritual practice coaching, your divinations, your spiritual counseling, and more. So today we're going to talk about setting up the Jesus Egregore, and we're going to look at a case study of how a Jesus Egregore was set up by a Catholic nun in the last century, which was not too long ago. Some of you might remember that we used to be in the 20th century, and um, now we're in the 21st century. Some people only know the 21st century, but many of us out here, we are familiar with the 20th century. Many of us were born in the 20th century. So um, we're going to talk about that. Remember, we are working on the Egregore series. I have been putting out little videos in addition to the main videos I put out a couple of weekends ago about the Jesus Egregore. Okay, so if you don't know what an egregore is and the origins of the Jesus Egregore, I encourage you to go ahead and watch those videos because it will give you a context for everything that we are doing here. Okay. So remember that we're going to take a minute to like the class. Okay, so I'm going to, well, I don't need to do that. Okay. Remember to share the live stream. Again, share the live screen. Please go ahead and share the live screen. Live screen. The live stream. And that will let people know that class is in session. Remember that an egregore is similar to a servitor. An egregore is an entity with consciousness that has been created by a group of people. And the more energy they pour into this egregore, the stronger it becomes and the more conscious it becomes. Okay? There are different kinds of egregores around the world. There are a lot of egregores in religious groups and religious organizations. Okay. And so, regardless of your religious beliefs, you will find egregores there. Egregores feed on attention and devotion and emotions and things of that nature. Okay. That's what they feed on. And depending on how the egregore was set up, it can feed on even more than just the attention and emotions. Okay. So, pretty much every religion that we know of, unless it's just a group of atheists sitting around a table, they have egregores that they're working with. Okay. They pretty much have egregores. Okay. And sometimes these egregores grow to become so powerful that they can start controlling people. And we find quite a bit of this in Christianity. As an example, Christianity is not the only religion that has egregores that control people. There are other religions that also have egregores that control people. Okay. And people show up willing to be controlled. Okay. So we have been looking at the Jesus egregore and how that came about. We have looked at the difference between Jesus the man and Jesus the egregore. We have looked at the difference between Jesus the man and Jesus the business and Jesus the egregore. Okay. And so today we're going to look at an example of a Catholic nun who set up her own Jesus egregore. All right. We're going to look at a nun who set up her own Jesus egregore. Remember to give the class a thumbs up and a heart that lets folks know that class has started. Now, I was actually looking for some other information. Believe it or not, I was trying to sign up uh, for some concert tickets. Bach. Um, we have some choirs around town that are going to be singing Bach and playing Bach. And in the process of trying to purchase these concert tickets for Bach, I came across the name of an interesting lady, and I decided to do a quick research on her. And you know how things happen serendipitously, okay? So you're trying to do one other thing, looking for information in one direction, and then information in another direction shows up, okay? So when I started looking into her, I was I was amazed, and I was like, you know what? I think we need to share this in our Jesus Egregore series. Now, there's this lady. Her name is Maria Faustina Kowalska. Okay, And that's her nun name. Her birth name was Helena Kowalska, and she was born in 1905, and she passed 5th of October 1938. Okay, so she passed when she was 33 years old. She was a Polish Catholic religious sister, and she had apparitions of Jesus Christ, which inspired the Catholic devotion to the Divine Mercy. And sometimes she's called the Secretary of the Divine Mercy or the Apostle of the Divine Mercy. And let me just do a quick run through of her background before we start. And as I'm going through this, I want you to be listening for some key information. Remember that when we talked about the building or the construction of an egregore, there has to be an anchor. So that anchor is a picture, a symbol, a sigil, an object. There has to be something that egregore, that consciousness that is being created, has to be attached to. And it is attached to that, and then it can start working and start expressing its consciousness. Okay. So I want you to pay attention to this as I go through a quick rundown of this lady, this nun, Helena or Faustina. Okay. Remember, we also talked about having rules and instructions for egregores. If you're setting up an egregore that's going to have a certain level of consciousness, not only does it have to have a physical anchor, but it also has to have rules. What triggers it? It has to have a trigger. It has to have a task, something that it does, or something that you want it to do. Okay? And the person who creates it typically has the on or off switch to it. So they can switch it on or switch it off. And then you will have to have a means of rewarding this egregore or have a means of feeding this egregore. Because if the egregore is not fed, it will not survive. Okay. So we're going to see this in the way this Catholic nun set up this Jesus egregore, which is very interesting. And I'm going to see if I can share a picture that many of you might be familiar with. You would have seen this picture in maybe you have it in your home or you've seen it in other people's homes. Okay. So do you hear me all right? Okay, let me close this. Hold on. I want to make sure folks on YouTube can hear me. Hold on. Okay, so you can. All right. Thank you very much. Actually, so it's not even using the microphone. So let me disconnect that. I hooked up my handy dandy fancy microphone there, but since it didn't connect to that, then that's okay. All right. Thank you very much. So let me give you a little bit about this lady, okay? So Maria Faustina Kowalska, okay, she was born August 25, 1905. She was a Virgo, and pay attention to that. A lot of people who are into mysticism, into self denial, and when I say self denial, that is self depreciation. They're used to suffering and they're used to fasting. They're used to punishing the body. They have religious and health extremes. You find quite a bit of them under the sign of Virgo. So it could be a sun sign of Virgo, moon sign of Virgo, ascendant of Virgo, and so forth. Okay. So she had apparitions of Jesus Christ, which inspired the Catholic devotions to the Divine Mercy. Okay. And so throughout her life, remember, she only lived for 33 years, she reported having visions of Jesus and having conversations with Jesus, which she noted in her diary, later published as the Diary of Saint Maria Faustyna Kowalska, Divine Mercy in My Soul. Her biography, submitted to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints, quoted some of the conversations she had with Jesus regarding the Divine Mercy devotion. At the age of 20 years, she joined a convent in Warsaw. Okay. She was later transferred to Plock and then to Vilnius, where she met Father Mikhail Sopocko. Okay, and I might be mispronouncing that because I'm not Polish, who was to be her confessor and spiritual director, and who supported her devotion to the Divine Mercy. With this priest's help, Kowalska commissioned an artist to paint the first Divine Mercy image based on her vision of Jesus. So pay attention to that. So with the help of this priest, who was her spiritual director and her confessor, Kowalska commissioned an artist, and it turns out that this artist was a professor at the local university in that town. And her confessor, this Father Mikhail, was also a professor at the same university. Okay. Father Sepulko celebrated Mass in the presence of this painting on Low Sunday, also known as the second Sunday of Easter. Okay. The Catholic Church canonized Kowalska as a saint on the 30th of April 2000. She's classified in the liturgy as a virgin and is venerated within the church as the apostle of divine mercy. So in the Catholic Church, she's a saint, and she's venerated in the Catholic Church as the apostle, as a saint, and the apostle of divine mercy. Her tomb is in the Divine Mercy Sanctuary, Krakow, where she spent the end of her life and met another confessor, Józef Andrasz, who supported the message of mercy. Okay. So she wanted to join a convent at a very young age. Her parents were humble peasants, and they forbade her from joining the convent. They didn't want her to join the convent. But eventually, when she was 18, she went with her sister Natalia to a dance in the park. And she said at the dance, she had a vision of a suffering Jesus who she believed asked her, "How long shall I put up with you? And how long will you keep putting me off?" She then went to the Lodz Cathedral, where, as she later said, Jesus instructed her to depart for Warsaw immediately and enter a convent. She took a train for Warsaw, some 85 miles away, without asking her parents' permission, and despite the fact she knew nobody in Warsaw. The only belonging she took with her was the clothes on her back. Okay. So when she got there, she was working as a housemaid to save the money she needed, making deposits at the convent throughout the year. And she was finally accepted at the convent. At the age of 20 years, she was clothed in the habit and received the religious name Maria Faustina of the Blessed Sacrament. Okay? So from 1925 to 29, she was posted to the convent in Vilnius, then in Poland, and now the capital of Lithuania, where she served as a cook. Okay. Later, she was transferred to the convent in Plock, Poland. And it was in there in 1930. That year, the first signs of her illness, she fell ill. She became ill. Okay. And it is thought that she became ill with tuberculosis. Remember, we're looking at the early 19th, no, early 20th century, and tuberculosis was very common, especially in Europe. And tuberculosis was spread from Europe to Africa and also to the Americas. All right. And back then, there was no antibiotics to treat tuberculosis. So you either made it or you didn't make it. It was just those two options. Okay. So she was ill. Okay. And she was sent to rest for several months in a nearby farm owned by her congregation. In other words, owned by the convent. After her recovery, she returned to the convent, so after 1 year, and she had been there for a while. And then she wrote, after she came back, she was in her cell. So, in these convents, they had rooms, and these rooms were like cells. Okay. So they weren't lavish bedrooms the way that we have bedrooms now. They weren't like the lavish bedrooms of the nobility. She had a cell. And generally, these cells were made of stone. Okay. These are stone cells with very simple beds. Very, very simple beds. Okay. Um, the beds were oftentimes made of wood. If they ever had a mattress, it would be a mattress, thin mattress made of straw. And they were not designed to be comfortable. Because remember, again, they were not there to have a life of luxury. They were there to pray to God and fast and do all those fun things that religious people do. So, anywho, so here she is in her cell. And she said that Jesus appeared wearing a white garment with red and pale rays emanating from his heart. And in her diary, she wrote that Jesus told her, paint an image according to the pattern you see, with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. I desire that this image be venerated, first in your chapel and then throughout the world. I promise that the soul that will venerate this image will not perish. Okay, so you see now it had to have a signature. Jesus, I trust in you. There had to be an image with the signature. And when we look at egregores, remember what we just said about egregores. Egregores have to have a key trigger, a phrase, a unique phrase that sets them in motion, that gets them started. Okay. So when people create egregores, they have to have a trigger. They have to have like a trigger phrase or trigger word. Once that thing is said, this activates the egregore. The egregore starts paying attention to the person who used that trigger word. And then look at the instructions. I desire that this image be venerated. In other words, the image you're going to draw of me, it needs to be worshipped. And then you will first do it in your chapel. So you'll first convince everybody in your convent. Okay. And then after that, you will convince people around the world to start worshiping, venerating. Okay. And now that is the energy, the feeding source for this egregore, the veneration. Not knowing how to paint, Kowalska approached some other nuns at the convent in Plock for help, but she received no assistance. 3 years later, after her assignment to Vilnius, the first artistic rendering of the image was produced under her direction. In the same February 1931, message about the divine mercy image, because now this image was called divine mercy. Okay, so this image of Jesus, this specific image of Jesus, is called divine mercy. Jesus told her that he wanted the divine mercy image to be solemnly blessed on the first Sunday after Easter Sunday. That Sunday is to be the first of mercy. So that was the day that the egregore was activated. Listen to this. In late May 1933, Kowalska, which is this nun, was transferred to Vilnius to work as the gardener. Her tasks included growing vegetables. The convent in Vilnius then had only 18 sisters, in other words, 18 nuns, and was housed in a few scattered houses. Shortly after arriving there, she met the priest Michael Sopoko, the newly appointed confessor to the nuns. He was also a professor of pastoral theology at Stefan Battery University, now called Vilnius University. So you see now she's meeting a priest, a Catholic priest, who's very educated, highly educated. He was a professor at a university. Okay. And remember when I introduced the topic of egregores, I said a lot of the people who knew how to create and activate egregores were highly educated people, people who had access to arcane and occult information. And here we are dealing with a professor. Okay. And he had it would be hard to argue that he did not have access to arcane and occult material of his time, because back then, it was the deal. It's even the deal now. So when Kowalska went for the first time to this priest for confession, she told him that she had been conversing with Jesus, who had a plan for her. After some time, Sopoko insisted on a complete psychiatric evaluation of Kowalska by Helena Kowalska, a psychiatrist and a physician associated with the convent. Kowalska, Faustina Kowalska, she passed the psychiatric test and was declared of sound mind. Okay? So, Sopoko, that's the professor, then began to have confidence in Kowalska. So now that she went through the psychiatric evaluation and they said, okay, she's not crazy. Actually, she's okay up here. So the professor started saying, I think this lady is onto something. So he started having confidence in what she was saying and then started supporting her efforts. Kowalska told Sopoko about the Divine Mercy image, and in January 1934, Sopoko introduced her to the artist Eugene Kamierowski, who was also a professor at the university. Okay. Thank you for the likes. He was a professor at the university, and he introduced her to another professor at the university who was going to do the drawing. We would not be surprised if Professor Sopoko and Professor Kazmierowski belonged to the same group, because it's highly unlikely that he would go and pick any random professor at the university and say, hey, I've got this nun that I'm working with. I'm her spiritual director and confessor, and she's been talking to Jesus. Hey, do you have a moment to come and help us draw some Jesus pictures? No. He will go to somebody that he's comfortable with. He will go to somebody that has the same beliefs as him. He will go to somebody that he pallies with. So, and remember that And back in the day in Europe, people used to have these networks spanning countries and regions, and they all belonged to the same occult group, same mystical group, same metaphysical group, and they met from time to time. But here we have two professors of the same university, one supporting and saying, yes, 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 okay. Jesus told you to create this thing and call it divine mercy and paint a picture of him. And I have another professor here at the university who's going to do just that. So start thinking about this. Remember, in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, the priests are higher than the nuns. The priests are higher than the nuns, and they're the ones who usually give instructions to the nuns. But now we have a situation where a nun is giving instructions to two priests. You can see that this is not usual. Okay? So by June 1934, Kazimierowski had finished painting the image based on the direction of Kowalska and Sopocko, the only Divine Mercy painting that Kowalska saw. This was the only image she saw before she died, because remember, she passed when she was 33 years old. According to Catholic author Ursula and Gregor Sick, a superimposition of the face of Jesus in the image of the Divine Mercy upon that of Jesus in the already famous Shroud of Turin shows great similarity. Now, Kowalska wrote in her diary that on Good Friday, 19th April 1935, Jesus told her that he wanted the Divine Mercy image to be publicly honored. This was now signifying that the setup of this egregore was now complete. Because now we remember, now we have an image that we're anchoring this thing to. We have a statement that triggers it. Jesus, I trust in you. Okay, so we have an image, we have a statement, and then now we need to start feeding this egregore so that it can become active. And once this egregore becomes active, it will start doing things. And it will start giving information or doing whatever it is that we need it to do. When you're setting up an egregore, it must be fed. Remember, we talked about that in the first class. Okay, so the first mass, so she wrote in her diary that Jesus told her that he wanted the Divine Mercy image to be publicly honored. Now, I want you to think about this. Is there anywhere in the New Testament where Jesus said, I will visit you, I need you to venerate my image, or I will visit you in the future and set up my image that you can venerate? If you look at the whole New Testament, there's nowhere in there where Jesus the man is recorded to have said anything about his image being venerated, his image being worshipped, his image being prayed to. There's nowhere. Okay. I know some Christians will say, oh, well, how about the place where he says, oh, at the end that the Son of Man shall be lifted up and all the eyes of the world will be upon him, just like Moses lifted the symbol of the serpent and saved people, or something like that. Is that what Jesus said? Did he say that you will worship an image of me? And most people that quote that verse about the Son of Man going to be lifted up, remember that verse is in context of, oh, he'll be lifted up after 3 days. In other words, after he'll be crucified, he should be lifted up after 3 days. Not that an image, a painting of him was going to be made and people would have to venerate that image. Okay? So, the first Mass during which the Divine Mercy image was displayed occurred on 28th April 1935, the second Sunday of Easter, and was attended by Kowalska. So this nun, Kowalska. In September 1935, Kowalska wrote of two visions about the chaplet of Divine Mercy in her diary. So now this is later that year. We're talking about what? 4, 5, 6 months later. Pay attention to this. She wrote of two visions about the chaplet of Divine Mercy in her diary. Okay? And what did this mean? According to her, the chaplet prayers and structure were dictated to her directly by Jesus Christ, who granted several promises to its recitation. The chaplet is about a third of the length of the rosary. Kowalska wrote that the purpose for the chaplet's prayers for mercy is threefold: to obtain mercy, to trust in Christ's mercy, and to show mercy to others. So you see here, now this is where they're setting up the function of the egregore and the instructions required to operate the egregore. So remember, the first thing she said was, you have to say, Jesus, I trust in you. And then now she's giving, after you've said that, then here are these other things that you need to do. And after you do these things, then this egregore will do what you need it to do for you. And the name of this egregore is called Divine Mercy, and is going to be anchored to an image of Jesus. Now, let me pull up a picture of this egregore, because I'm sure that many of you have seen this image. If some of you might have this image in your own homes, or you've seen it in someone else's home. So let me start with the TikTok folks. Hold on. I need to be able to see. How do I should be able to reverse the screen, right? Hold on. Flip camera. There we go. So here we go. Okay. So I'm sure I'm showing it to the TikTok people first. Do you see this Jesus, just like she said, had a ray of red coming out and a ray of white? And she said the ray of red represented the blood, and the ray of white represented the tears or the sweat of Jesus. And if you look at this, you will notice that this image is very common. This image is very common in many Catholic places. I've seen this image in many homes, in African homes, and Hispanic homes, Latino homes. Now, let me show this image to the folks. I want to show this image to the folks in the. Google Chrome is requesting to bypass the system private window picker and directly access your screen and audio. Okay. So we'll close you. I want to see. Hold on. Hold on, TikTok folks. I want to show you this image. Window. Okay, there we go. So TikTok folks, hold on. I want to show the YouTube folks this image. So there we go. So those of you who are on YouTube, you should be able to see this picture. It should look familiar to you. So this is the image that the professor from the university drew at the instance of Kowalski. Okay, and you can see the red ray representing blood and the white ray representing sweat or tears. Okay, all right. So let's stop the sharing and continue with the class. So, so remember again here the instructions for this thing. Paint an image according to the pattern you see with the signature, Jesus, I trust in you. I desire that this image be venerated first in your chapel and then throughout the world. I promise that the soul that will venerate this image will not perish. Okay. So remember now, so by September, she's now saying here the instructions for venerating and working with divine mercy. Okay, which is basically just Jesus of divine mercy, which is a type of egregore, a type of Jesus egregore. In November, which is 2 months later, November 1935, Kowalska wrote the rules. Notice the term rules for a new contemplative religious congregation devoted to the divine mercy. So now they're forming a group, a church, a following for this egregore. Okay? So she wrote the rules. She's like, okay, we need to put together a group of people who are devoted to this Jesus of divine mercy. In December, she visited a house in Vilnius that she said she has seen in a vision as the first convent for the congregation. In January the next year, 1936, Kowalska went to see Jaruzelski, which I believe Jaruzelski wasn't that the person who drew the image, to discuss a new congregation for divine mercy. However, he reminded her that she was perpetually vowed to her current congregation. So she was a nun and she had taken vows to her current congregation. In other words, these these vows were in perpetua, they forever. And so remember the video I put out about terms and conditions for spiritual covenants, that if you were going to be participating or partaking in a spiritual covenant with any spirit guide or spiritual entity, you ought to be very clear as to the terms and conditions that you are swearing to. She swore perpetual allegiance to that convent. In other words, even after passing, after transition, she could not betray or leave or abandon the group of nuns. Remember, there were 18 when she went there, 18 women. She could not betray them, she could not leave them. And so she was being reminded by the spiritual director here that she had made a vow. Okay. And it says she was perpetual means forever, vowed to her current congregation. In March 1936, Kowalska told her superiors that she was thinking of leaving the congregation to start a new one that was specifically devoted to divine mercy. So she was like, no, I need to break this vow because I need to go with this egregore that I've just created. So once she told them that, they transferred her to another location. Sounds like a job, right? Sounds like a 9 to 5. You try to tell them and say, well, I have some ideas that are going to be to my benefit. And before you know it, they're transferring you, or they're giving you another task and giving you another assignment, or demoting you, or doing something like that. She reported that Jesus said to her, "My daughter, do whatever is within your power to spread the devotion to my divine mercy. I will make up for what you lack." So in that 1936, Sepoko, remember her first confessor and spiritual director of the congregation where she was, wrote the first brochure on the Divine Mercy devotion, and Jal Brzezowski provided his imprimatur or his signature on it. The brochure carried the Divine Mercy image, that image that I just showed of Jesus with the rays, on the cover. Sopocko sent copies of the brochure to Kowalska, the lady in Warsaw. Eventually, he became the main promoter of her revelations. So, throughout all this while, she's still getting revelations. She's writing it in her diary and she's communicating it because she's in communication with this egregore. Okay. Later in 1936, Kowalska became ill with what has been speculated to be tuberculosis. She was moved to a sanatorium in Krakow. She continued to spend much time in prayer, reciting the chaplet and praying for the conversion of sinners. The last 2 years of her life were spent praying and keeping her diary. In 1937, she wrote that she had a vision that the feast of the Divine Mercy of this egregore would be celebrated in her local chapel. Remember that chapel where she told them she was thinking of leaving, and then they quickly transferred her to somewhere else because they didn't want her to spread discontent. That's how these things start. By the time you'd be talking about your idea, talking about your idea, talking about your idea, before you know it, other people who are around you start getting convinced of that idea. And her convent didn't want her to do that. They wanted everybody here. We're already working with our own Jesus egregore. Who are you to try and put up your own Jesus egregore? Okay. So she wrote in her diary that she had a vision that the Feast of the Divine Mercy would be celebrated in her local chapel and would be attended by large crowds, and that the same celebration would be held in Rome, attended by the Pope. So now she's looking into the future for this egregore as to how big it's going to be. It's going to be so big and so powerful that even the Pope will venerate this egregore. So in 1937, the first holy cards with the Divine Mercy image were printed. In August, Sopoko, remember the professor, the priest professor, asked Kowalska, the nun, to write the instructions for the novena of Divine Mercy, which she had reported as a message from Jesus on Good Friday in 1937. So now a novena is a specific prayer to a saint. You have novena to Mary, novena to Jesus, novena to St. Jude, novena. So now here he is saying, okay, we need you as original visualizer of this egregore to write the prayer. So once we invoke this egregore, activate this egregore, how do we talk to it? Okay. The pamphlet included the chaplet, the novena, and the litany of the Divine Mercy. So she developed all of that. The Divine Mercy image appeared on the cover with the signature, "Jesus, I trust in you." On 10th of November 1937, Mother Irene, who was Kowalska's superior, so Mother Irene was above her in the convent, showed her the booklets while Kowalska rested in bed, because remember, she was still sick with tuberculosis. As her health deteriorated at the end of 1937, Kowalska's reported visions intensified, and she was said to be looking forward to an end to her life. In April 1938, her illness had progressed and she was sent to rest in the sanatorium in Pradnik for what was to be her final stay there. In September 1938, Sopoko, who was that priest, the very first priest who started working on this thing with her, visited her at the sanatorium and found her very ill, but in ecstasy as she was praying. Later that month, she was taken back home to Krakow to await her death there. Sopoko visited her at the convent for the last time on 26th of September 1938. Kowalska died at the age of 33 on 5th of October 1938 in Krakow. She was buried 2 days later on October 7th and now rests at Krakow's Basilica of Divine Mercy. Okay? Now, in the handwritten pages of her diary turned into 700 printed pages and were published as the book Diary Divine Mercy in My Soul. It reflects her thoughts, prayers, and reported visions and conversations with Jesus on divine mercy. In March 1959, the Holy Office issued a notification that forbade circulation of images and writings that promote devotion to divine mercy in the forms proposed by Sister Faustina. Okay? So initially the Vatican was like, you know what? Stop this thing. Okay, stop it. We've not approved it. And Catholics worldwide should disregard this thing. Don't get involved in it. Don't show any veneration, devotion to it. We have not authorized it. But notice the words in the form proposed by Sister Faustina. So, in other words, they looked at everything she had written, the structure and everything, and they disagreed with the structure through which this egregore was to be activated and used. Okay? The ban on her work remained in place for almost 2 decades, but was reversed in 1978. Okay? So another group in power, the Vatican, looked at everything and said, no, we want to move forward with this. Okay? Um, in 1942, Jal Brzezowski was arrested by the Nazis, and Sopoko and other professors went into hiding near Vilnius for about 2 years. During that period, Sopoko used his time to prepare for the establishment of a new religious congregation based on the Divine Mercy messages reported by Kowalska. After the war, Sopoko wrote the constitution for the congregation and helped the formation of what is now the Congregation of the Sisters of Divine Mercy. By 1951, 13 years after Kowalska's death, there were 150 Divine Mercy centers in Poland. In 1956, Pope Pius XII blessed an image of the Divine Mercy in Rome, the only one blessed by a pope before the Second Vatican Council. So remember what she has said started coming to pass. The veneration, the worship of this egregore was to start locally in her chapel and start spreading until it got to the Vatican and will be honored by the Pope himself. So eventually she was canonized, she was beatified and canonized, and she became a saint. And so now she's known as Saint Faustina. And there were two accounts of her doing miracles after she had passed. Okay. So there are rules for this egregore. There are 7 main forms of this devotion. So if you're going to be devoted to this egregore, the Divine Mercy image with the specific inscription, Jesus, I trust in you. Yes, Unleashed Academy. Go back 2 Sundays ago. That's when I started. And I have many videos on all platforms, including this one, talking about this. But the main 2 classes were Sunday and Monday of last week. So the 7 main forms of devotion to this egregore is the Divine Mercy image with the specific inscription, Jesus, I trust in you. So for you to activate this egregore, you have to start by saying, Jesus, I trust in you. Okay. The commemoration of the Feast of the Divine Mercy Sunday, the recitation of the Chaplet of the Divine Mercy, the recitation of the Divine Mercy Novena, the designation of the hour of mercy at 3 p.m., spreading mercy by word, deed, or prayer, the spreading of works of mercy to the whole humanity in preparation for the return of Jesus Christ to earth. Proclaim that mercy is the greatest attribute of God. So now, remember Jesus was preaching love. When you look at the New Testament, you can see Jesus, the man, was preaching love. But here, they're saying the greatest attribute of God is mercy, divine mercy. So you now see, like what I was saying when I started this series, is that there are different Jesus egregores out there. And sometimes people think that they're worshiping or venerating the same Jesus, but they're not. And some people think that they're worshiping or venerating Jesus the man. Some people believe that they're worshiping or venerating Jesus the Spirit or Jesus the God. But very few people understand that they're venerating and worshiping Jesus the egregore. And there are like hundreds of these Jesus egregores because each and every one of them have different functions. As the prayers that form the chaplet of the Divine Mercy, there are 3 main themes to the Divine Mercy devotion: to ask for and obtain the mercy of God, to trust in Christ's abundance mercy, and finally to show mercy to others and act as a conduit for God's mercy towards them. Okay? So, the Divine Mercy devotion views mercy as the key element in the plan of God for salvation. Okay? Now, later on, there's somebody else who drew their own image of this divine mercy. Okay. A number of Christian orders and institutions are devoted to the divine mercy. The John Paul II Institute of Divine Mercy is managed by the Congregation of Marian Fathers, which takes an active role in promoting the divine mercy message. Okay, so we're having different groups, different people promoting this thing, and then we have an hour. The time of 3 p.m. corresponds to the hour that they say Jesus died on the cross, and this hour is called the hour of divine mercy or the hour of great mercy. And this is how this lady gained this title of the Apostle of Divine Mercy. Okay. So let's see if folks have been listening and understand what we have been teaching in today's class. What is the function of this Jesus egregore of divine mercy? From everything I've described, how it was formed, who formed it, what went into forming it, the opposition, the work, the everything that went into it, what was the main function of this egregore called Jesus of Divine Mercy? And while you're thinking up what the answer to that question is, it is also significant to note that Sister Faustina passed at 33. And it is said that Jesus, the man, passed at the age of 33. And I can share my thoughts around that. I believe that Sister Faustina made the ultimate sacrifice to establish this egregore. You know, we have to be careful about these platforms, but she paid the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that this egregore was established and that it will stand. And you have to remember that, when we talk about mystical, because she's also described as a mystic. If you look in Wikipedia, she's described as a mystic. People who were mystics and metaphysicians and occult workers and magicians, many of them were willing to lay their life on the line for their work. Okay. These people were not like us. We're like, oh no, I got a car. I got a car note. I got a job. I don't want to miss the cookout, and I got this thing going on and I need to go on my vacation and I want to visit, 140 countries before I kick the bucket and so on and so on and so forth. Um, you know, or how many countries are there now? 160, 170. It looks like they're manufacturing countries every year. But anywho, people of those days who were, especially in Europe, where they were creating these Jesus egregores, they didn't think like us. They weren't like, oh, I want to visit here, I want to do this, I have these goals for my life, I want to be, this and that. No, no, no. It was just the one thing. They always had the one thing, and they would do anything and everything to make that one thing come to pass. They didn't have multiple interests. They didn't say, okay, well, let me think about my mom and my dad. How about my descendants? And this is the reason why, when a lot of them became missionaries and they started going to Asia and Africa and the Americas to preach their version of Christianity, they often taught a totalitarian version of Christianity. And what do I mean by totalitarian version? All or nothing. So their view of Christianity was, you got to give it your all, even if it means you have to sacrifice your family, your peace of mind, your job, your income, your all of those things are unimportant compared to you devoting yourself to this religion. And that is why when you go to developing nations, Christianity has become so devastating. It has become so devastating. Miss Tanya, Joan of Arc was centuries before the 20th century. All this we're talking about, this Sister Faustina, happened in the 20th century, which was just the century we just left. Okay. So, who can tell me the function of this egregore that Sister Faustina created? Who can tell me the function of this egregore based on everything we've read about and discussed about and mentioned about this egregore? What do you think was the function of this egregore? What do you think the what this egregore was supposed to do? Let's see if folks are picking up what we're dropping here. What was the function of this egregore? What was this supposed to do for people? Anyone? For me, this was so fascinating. And like I said, I was looking for information about a concert. There's a concert I'll be attending this weekend where they're going to be singing some of this classical music. And, through looking at one thing and the other, and then I happened upon her. So, what says, I guess, show mercy? Okay. Show mercy for what? Holly Shiloh says, make people merciful. Think about what you just wrote. I have created an egregore called Divine Mercy. And I have given instructions about how to activate this egregore. And I have said here, again, listen to this. As often as you hear the clock strike the third hour, immerse yourself completely in my mercy, adoring and glorifying it. This is ultimate worship. This is the description of ultimate worship. It says, immerse yourself completely in my mercy, adoring and glorifying it. So here we're talking about how to feed this egregore. Invoke its omnipotence for the whole world. These are the words. And this is what she wrote in her diary. Invoke. It didn't say ask. It says invoke its omnipotence. Omnipotence means power over everything. For the whole world, and particularly for poor sinners. For at that moment, mercy was opened wide for every soul. In this hour, you can obtain everything for yourself and for others for the asking. It was the hour of grace for the whole world. Mercy triumphed over justice. If you guys only knew how deep this rabbit hole is, if you only understood how deep this rabbit hole is, your minds would be blown. That's why we have forbidden fruit here. Okay, let's find out who is knowledgeable in the class. Where would you find justice and mercy? Where do you find justice and mercy? I want to show you something. Some of you, justice and mercy in the court, yes. Okay, some of you come in my comment section and say, I'm a tarot card reader. I'm a tarot card reader. I'm a tarot card reader. You should be able to answer this question. Where do you find justice and mercy? Let me go through my tarot cards. I want to show you how deep this thing is. Onyenye Chukwu said in the court. What kind of court? And I think those words that I read were very plain. The words I read were very plain because basically what she wrote is here's the function of this egregore. If you want to use this Jesus egregore called Jesus of Divine Mercy or call it Divine Mercy for short, do you notice that justice? Do you notice that justice has two pillars on either side of her? She has two pillars, two columns on either side of her. What she wrote is that in that hour, mercy will prevail over justice. What is the function of this egregore? Man, y'all, look, she spelled everything out. You need to understand this. She spelled everything out. Because in that hour, you invoke, remember she used the word invoke the omnipotence. Mercy will prevail over justice. So, what is the function of this egregore? For those of you who say that you are tarot card readers, you are familiar with the tarot card, what does this card signify? Take a look at this card very well. Look at what it says at the bottom. Look at the image of this card and all the symbolism on it. Those of you who say you're familiar with the tarot card, does this ring a bell with respect to, let me put it close for the TikTok folks to see it. Does this ring a bell with what this lady was talking about, this egregore she created? I don't know. Sorry, on TikTok, it's not focusing the way it needs to focus. Come on now. Somebody should give me hope. Somebody should give me hope here. What is the function of this egregore that this woman created in the Catholic Church? No, not yin and yang. No, not balance. No, 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 no. Holy Shiloh says mercy instead of justice. What is the function of the egregore that she created? She said it, and I just read it out. Do you want me to read again what she has nothing to do with inner wisdom, has nothing to do with the divine. That's not what she said. She was very plain in describing the function of this egregore. Enzo, to be worshipped and then in return answer their prayers. Their prayers for what? What is the function of this egregore? I will read it again. In February 1938, still, according to Kowalska, Christ said to her about this hour, remember the third hour of the day, 3 p.m. As often as you hear the clock strike the third hour, immerse yourself completely in my mercy, adoring and glorifying it. Invoke its omnipotence for the whole world, and particularly for poor sinners. For at that moment, Mercy was opened wide for every soul. In this hour, you can obtain everything for yourself and for others for the asking. It is the hour of grace for the whole world. Mercy triumphed over justice. What is the function of the egregore? I want to share the screen here. No, it's not grace. Come on now, work with me. No, it's not grace. Okay, so for those of you on YouTube, I have highlighted it. Let me see if I can make it bigger. No. Oh my God. Okay, I made it bigger and I've highlighted it so you can read it for yourself. What is the function of this egregore? I'll put on the fan here. Oh my God. Okay, let's see some answers. Zuripenda says perfect ultimate freedom from whatever. Tanya Jones says to obtain mercy for the asking. Miss Tanya Jones is correct. Why would I want to obtain mercy? Why would I want to, if I am facing this, why would I want to obtain mercy? Do you see what I meant when I started teaching about egregores? I said these things are set up by master occultists, master magicians, master mystics, master metaphysicians, master spiritual practitioners. Someone would have had to make a mistake in order to want mercy. She was very plain in what she wrote, and those of you on TikTok, unfortunately, you're not seeing what I highlighted here. Mercy triumphed over justice. So we're having a situation where I am about to be judged. And if I am judged rightly, I will not escape that judgment. However, I have this egregore that if I invoke it properly, it will give me I will be shown mercy. And that mercy will supersede any judgment that has been made against me. Where could I use this egregore? Where could I use this egregore? Where could I use this egregore? Where could I use this egregore in my life? Let me have some examples. Because there's more to this thing. Where could I use this egregore? Where could you use this egregore for yourself? Because remember, when we're talking about egregores, when we started this series, there was a statement I made, and if you missed the very first class on Jesus the Egregore that I put out 2 Sundays ago, I recommend that you go watch that class. It's a long class. I think it's a 2 hour class I put out on YouTube, but it would help you to go watch that video because that's where I started laying out the basics. In that video, you will hear me saying, some egregores you can use them for good, and some egregores for not so good. The person or the people, because it takes more than one person to set up an egregore, and this is a prime example of it. It takes more than one person to set up an egregore. You see, this lady, Sister Faustina, was there. The professor Sopoko was there. His other professor who did the drawing was there. Um, there were so many hands in this pot. Even mother, what was the name of that mother? You know, her mother superior at the convent was also involved in this thing. So there were many of them who were involved in setting up the egregore, and we know that to set up an egregore requires a group of people. One person cannot set up an egregore. It took her 3 years to find the right people to help her set up this egregore. Because if you remember what I was reading, it took her 3 years because she was asking and asking, and the nuns who were there with her couldn't help her. And eventually she told her confessor, and then the confessor, after he figured out that there was nothing psychiatrically wrong with her, jumped on the bandwagon. And it became huge. And they started crafting this thing. So, in light of what I just said now, how could you yourself, because remember, here we're all about practical spirituality, how could you use this egregore for yourself? Because in my first class, I said it. You can use a good egregore. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Jesus egregore, a Muhammad egregore, any kind of egregore, you can use it for yourself. A Buddha egregore, Yamoja egregore, Oshun egregore, Obatala egregore, Ogun egregore. So this particular egregore that this Sister Faustina set up, this egregore called Divine Mercy, how could you use this egregore in your life? Now we're coming down to the nitty gritty. We need to practicalize what we're learning here. I would be so disappointed if people just miss this. I would be so disappointed because this is as clear as day. This is as clear as day. How would you use this egregore on your own behalf? Use this egregore to help yourself. How? No, Miss Tanya. I want a specific example. How could you use this egregore on your own behalf? I'll be so disappointed if nobody's able to answer this because everything has been laid out plainly. Okay. So if you look at this card, what do you see? The high priestess. And she is seated between two pillars. The pillars here on this tarot card are known as the pillars of justice and mercy. If you look at this card, you will see that the priestess has a cross. She also has a copy of the Torah. The Torah is known as the book of the law. She's a high priestess. She's not a high priest. She's female. And this can be a representation of Sister Faustina and the work she was doing between justice and mercy. And this high priestess has the ability to either make justice prevail over mercy or mercy prevail over justice. So we see that even this tarot card has an occult meaning that is entrenched in this story about the creation of this egregore called Jesus of Divine Mercy. This high priestess here is a virgin. Sister Faustina was a virgin. This high priestess is concerned about issues concerning justice and mercy. Sister Faustina was concerned about issues concerning justice and mercy. And you can see her dressing. She's covered modestly. The nuns in the convent were covered and dressed modestly. You see the sign, the crescent moon at her feet. The moon is related to visions, psychic visions, to messages, intuition, dreams, hallucinations, illusions, deception. And she has 7. Okay, I don't have my glasses on here. I don't know if those are 7 flowers or 7 fruit. It looked like fruit to me. No, actually, it's more than 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At least 8 are showing. Fruit hanging off of trees. So she has fruit bearing trees behind her. And each one has a multiplicity of seeds. Fruit bearing, multiple seeds. I'm going to end the class here. Because I'm kind of sad people weren't able to answer that question. Ife says, pray yourself out of any problems. Is it any problems? Onyenchukwu says we can use it to ask for mercy. Is it ask for mercy? Are we using it to ask for mercy? To get mercy, correct. If I'm in a situation where the judgment is going to be against me, I can invoke this egregore to have whoever is in charge to have mercy on me, regardless. I will leave it at that. If you learned something from today's class, let's have your AYE, in the comment section. One thing we need to start learning is not to be not to get caught up in useless factionalization, useless. We need to be focused on problem solving. If there's a Jesus egregore out there that can solve your problem, you should, as a spiritual student, be able to access it without losing yourself. If there is an Obatala egregore out there that can solve your problem, you need to be in a position where you're like, you know what? I will access this egregore, I will fire it up, invoke it, and use it to solve my problem. There are many egregores out there that the creators have not revealed how to work it. But in this case, Sister Faustina clearly revealed how to work this egregore. She clearly showed how to work this egregore. Step by step by step. How to engage it, how to tap into it, how to invoke it, and then how to get what you want out of it. And you have to do it step by step by step by step by step. If you notice in her description of instructions for this egregore, there's nowhere where she wrote there that you have to be a Christian. There's nowhere in there where she wrote you have to be Catholic. There's nowhere in there that she wrote that you have to be one kind of way or the other kind of way. They created an egregore and they said, if you want to work this egregore, here's how to do it. And here is the function of this egregore. Okay. Those of you who are advanced members, we will be working with this egregore. I'm going to set up a class. I know that not this Saturday coming up is a member class, but the Saturday after that is advanced member class. So for advanced members, we're going to work with this egregore and see what we get. Because here is where we practicalize our spirituality. We're not just about talking about abstract things and who did what to whom. We're not here to wear fancy outfits and things of that nature unless we're going to a party. We're here to get results. We are here to get results. That's what we're here to do. We're thankful to our Creator, our guardian spirits, our ancestors, and our spirit guides for today's forbidden fruit. Ashe, Ise, Kamago, Takosa, Lasedi, Makwande, Ayebobo. And how it is done, is finished, is complete. It's Amen, Ma'at. Just a quick reminder that on September the 14th, we will be having a spiritual fast and detox. I have posted information about this on all my platforms. I think we're supposed to put that on my website. I'll go and check and see if it's on the website. If you would like to participate, it will be done online for 10 days. It'll be fasting, detoxing, and acquiring spiritual power. If you are interested in participating, send me an email. And you can read up all about it on all my platforms. Look for, even on YouTube, I posted it on the community page. So if you're on YouTube, go to the community page. My YouTube community page, you will see I posted everything about it there. Okay? It's an opportunity for you to build up your spiritual power, gain clarity, and start your spiritual practice. All right? Love you all. Thank you for coming to class. Thank you.